We've seen some very good growth over the last couple of years. I don't see that continuing at the same rate. No market ever can carry on going up, especially at the rate that it's been going up here.
Stephen, today we're talking about capital appreciation, specifically in the context of off-plan properties in Dubai. What factors influence capital appreciation, and of course, what your outlook is on the future of capital appreciation of off-plan properties in Dubai. So can you explain in simple terms what capital appreciation is in the context of off-plan properties in Dubai?
So capital appreciation in the context of off-plan properties here in Dubai is the increase in the value of a property that you have purchased either pre-construction, during construction, or by the time it's handed over.
Is there a difference between the kind of capital appreciation you expect at any of those stages?
The capital appreciation will depend on the popularity of the project itself. So if you have a project, for instance, might be a villa project here in Dubai that gets sold out in a couple of hours, it's likely that within a few weeks or months, you would be able to sell that for a premium. It doesn't always happen, and it's certainly not a strategy that I would recommend. However, there are different stages where could be optimal for you to resell at a profit, whether that be after you paid a certain amount, you're allowed to sell it. So developers in recent years have instigated terms and conditions in their sales and purchase agreements where you cannot sell until maybe 30% has been paid, or maybe 50% has been paid, or 50% of the construction has been completed. And at that point, you can decide whether this is the optimal time to sell. It's all about whether or not you see growth in the value based on what you paid. So quite often the optimal time to sell a property that's off plan is probably a year after it's been handed over. But that isn't always the case. I wouldn't say there's a general rule that one could follow. It's all about keeping an eye on the market, speaking to your real estate agent and deciding whether this is the best time for your personal strategy.
You mentioned that popularity is a factor that affects capital appreciation. What other key factors are there that drive capital appreciation in off-plan properties in Dubai?
Obvious things are obviously market demand for that specific property. Are there families moving into Dubai? Therefore, townhouses, villas are going to be more in demand. Other big factors are scarcity, as far as I'm concerned. You don't really want to be buying into a development where there's 5,000 very similar properties, or even 300 studios in one building. It's not really good, is it? You're going to be competing with 299 other people to rent or resell that apartment. So scarcity is very important in my book. Other elements are market conditions, the geopolitical situation in Dubai, the attractiveness of Dubai, any government legislation that comes in that might change things.
What about the development itself? So things like amenities.
So yeah, of course. Another major factor is a shopping mall opening, a new road opening, a junction, an interchange, a school or schools opening, more restaurants. A fancy restaurant may be something special opening in that particular building or in that location, which will perk the interest of either local or overseas buyers into looking at that property.
So when an investor's looking at a development project and they want to understand more about these factors that would drive capital appreciation, how do they understand that these things are happening around that development?
So if you're not familiar with Dubai or you're living overseas, that's a really tough one. You need to get a good agent helping you who can advise you, who may already know what the plans are. Quite often the plans are, certain plans are announced by the government. That can help, certainly when it comes to legislation. You can actually see the construction of a big mall that's happening, or a hospital or a school. When you visit a developer's office and you see a building, and you have to ask what other facilities are going to be around, and if on that plan there's a hospital, a school, etc., you've got to assume that that's going to happen. I would ask specifics. Which hospital is that going to be? When is it going to be completed? Have they started that project yet? When do you think it's going to happen? Okay, so there's going to put a new road in, or the metro is going to go. Has it actually been announced? You can go on. There's plenty of things you can Google and find out whether that metro is going to actually be going close to your new property.
So when we think about risks and challenges in investing in off-plan properties here, is it a good idea to rely solely on capital appreciation as an investment strategy?
I don't think it is a good strategy just to concentrate on capital appreciation as your strategy, because I think there are other factors, especially when you're going to resell that property. You need to know that it's going to get a good rental yield, that there's going to be a demand for that property from end users, not just from other investors. Yes, I guess there are some people who are buying into off-plan properties and thinking that they're going to flip them, so they're never going to see any rental income. That would probably come into the goal or the strategy of capital appreciation, buying a property that they're then going to flip. And when I talk about flipping, I mean they're just buying it to sell it and hoping that it's going to go up in value during construction or immediately once it's handed over. That's a strategy that some people do follow. Now, is that a good strategy? It's a risky strategy because there are other factors that you should take into account and think about what other people might want out of that property for you to benefit from just capital appreciation. Most people that I talk to are looking for a combination of rental yield and capital appreciation.
You mentioned earlier about doing comparative market analysis, and now Dubai has some history in property, 20 plus years of freehold. So now there's some historical data that you can look at to do some comparisons. Can you share some examples of how certain types of properties in Dubai have performed in terms of capital appreciation over the last decade?
Probably 6-7 years ago, you could have bought a 3-bedroom townhouse from Emaar for around $1 million. Today, that same townhouse is selling for probably 2.3 to 2.5 million dirhams. If you were renting it out today, you're probably getting 150, 160, which is a fantastic return on the million you paid. It's a reasonable return on the 2.3, 2.5 million. It's better than most markets in the world. You're going to get 5 or 6% net yield. That's a good return for a lot of people. But 15% is even better.
Do you have examples of properties that would traditionally have good capital appreciation, but now in the current market, you don't believe that they would achieve the same rate of capital appreciation?
So, look, a good example, a lot of people coming into the market want to start small. So they tend to end up buying studios. And I find that studio capital growth is completely linked to rental. So it's bought by an investor, it's not bought by an end user. End users don't tend to buy studios to live in. It normally is bought by an investor, a studio, and the value is completely commensurate with rents, the amount of rent you're going to get. So I want 8% out of buying that studio. Therefore, I'm getting 50,000. Therefore, I'm going to value that property as if I'm going to get 8% of the rate of 50,000. And that's the value of the property. We ourselves, as real estate agents, quite often look at studios and even one-bedrooms that are there for investors only rather than end users, and we value that property based on what the rent is at that time.
So now let's look at the future. What is your outlook on capital appreciation for off-plan properties in Dubai over the next 5 to 10 years?
So we've seen some very good growth over the last couple of years since COVID. And I don't see that continuing at the same rate. And in fact, in a way, I hope that it doesn't continue to increase because it's going to price a lot of people out of the market. We've seen, because of various geopolitical reasons, we've seen certain types of properties go up in value by huge amounts. Then again, we've seen other properties that have just gone up a little over the last couple of years. I think that there is a huge risk with some of those more expensive properties that have been selling at very high prices where are those going to end up over the next 2 or 3 years in terms of values.
Where do you think they will?
I think there's going to be, let's say, a price adjustment, a value adjustment, for sure. You can't keep, no market ever can carry on going up, especially at the rate that it's been going up here. Now, if you're in it for the long term, it's really not going to make any difference to you because your rental yield is still going to be very good. From where you bought a property off plan, you're renting it now, your return on your investment, your rental yield is going to be good. The fact that the value of that property might dip by 5 or 10% in a couple of years' time, it'll come back up again.
Is there any type of property that you would recommend for capital appreciation specifically?
Absolutely. I'd be looking at larger apartments and villas and townhouses. They are the ones where I see a lack of supply. All the major developers are playing catch up in terms of houses, villas, and up until now, a lot of the developers have been too frightened to build larger apartments. And when I say too frightened, it's because they're concerned that they won't be able to sell them and they'll be left with larger 2-beds and larger 3-bedroom apartments. And actually, the way that the dynamics of the population is changing, in that we're getting a lot more families moving here, not just single people. I'm not saying that if you buy a 1-bedroom or a studio, it's not going to go up in value. I can't tell you that. But I can tell you that historically, townhouses and villas have always done incredibly well in terms of capital appreciation. They didn't used to do that well in terms of yield, rental yield. But even now, they're certainly doing that because the rents have gone up a lot. If you need any help with off-plan property in Dubai, please get in touch. All my contact details are in the description below.